Folks, I saw this segment on the Roland Martin show this morning, and it has to do with voter suppression, voter fraud, gerrymandering, etc. Now, I've done several videos regarding the situation as far as voter suppression in North Carolina, Texas, and various other states. But this morning, Roland Martin had on his guest the Secretary of State of, or I believe it's the Attorney General for the state of Alabama. And, you know, I sat there and watched it purposely to see exactly what the interchange was going to be. And I got to tell you, I'm not going to try to blow smoke up your butts by saying there is no such thing as voter fraud. Nothing could be further from the truth. There is voter fraud, but not to the extent that these Republicans are claiming in order to substantiate these voter suppression laws that are being instituted throughout the country. Now, I'm going to play this clip for you and allow you to watch the interaction between Roland Martin and the elected official from Alabama. And then I'm going to give you some data exactly from the source that this gentleman is going to reference. Here we go.
A three-judge panel in Texas late Friday night declared the drawing of congressional districts in Texas to be unconstitutional and to impact severely Latino voters in a 2-1 decision. This federal panel slapped down the Republican legislature for their efforts. So here's what happened after the last census. Because of the Latino population rise in Texas, Texas picked up 5 new congressional districts due to Latinos. But Republicans said, ooh, goody, we're going to make these Republican districts. And so what they did was they made 4 of those districts largely for white members of Congress. And the one district that was supposed to be for a Latino member of Congress actually was won by Will Hurd, an African-American there in Congress. They made it perfectly clear that it was discriminatory. It was discriminatory what took place in Texas, and so it was several different districts that were actually impacted. But one of those districts in the Dallas area, they specifically did not say should be redrawn, but they did chastise for what took place there as well, folks. We have seen this over the years where, again, racial gerrymandering has taken place. We saw it happen in North Carolina. Now we see it here where the federal court said Texas intentionally drew a district based on race where such use of race was not justified by, quote, a compelling state interest. Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett's district is one of the 3 found to be legal. The other 2 Republican held. Doggett said, thank goodness for this ruling.
The district is one of the most gerrymandered.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. Okay, you see the areas in yellow? Okay, that is how the Republican legislature basically gerrymandered the district for this particular Democrat. Okay, they zigzagged, and one thing about a district, everything somehow has to touch. So they zigzagged this particular district so that if you know what a Rorschach test is, that's exactly what this looks like. It looks like a Rorschach test. There's no rhyme or reason except for racial districting or racial lines being drawn for a district to look like this. And don't get me wrong, folks. You can take a look at some of the Democratic controlled legislatures and how they draw districts as well. This needs to stop. They need to set up contiguous geographic areas that are districts. And if they can't do that, then we need to make some kind of a change. But, again, this is one person's district, and look at all the separation and all the area in between the two large yellow masses. And you got little, dips of yellow here, and there. That just ain't right. Anyway, let me get back to the video.
I think that if this court ruling is upheld, that we'll see some new members of the delegation who are Democratic and who don't spend all their time being anti-immigrant and anti-environment and anti-everything else.
All right, folks, so let's go to our panel. Attorney A. Scott Bolden, attorney, former chair, D.C. Democratic Party, Long Victoria Burke, political analyst and writer for NBC Black, and Eugene Craig, CEO of Eugene Craig Organizations. Folks, again, we've seen this many times beforehand, and I'm telling you, it's crazy. Because of the Latino population increase in because of the population increase in Texas, driven by Latinos, they said we're gonna make 4 of these Republican districts, maybe 1 Democrat district, and we're gonna screw Latino.
There's a 4 million person increase, mostly Latino people in Texas, and they turned that 4 million person increase into these districts. So I always wondered how Blake Farenthold and Will Hurd got elected. Will Hurd barely got elected.
Oh, he fought for that.
And then he barely, right. And then Blake Farenthold was a radio talk show guy, which that's not uncommon in politics now. We do have radio talk shows, but still.
Yeah, especially because you have the guy now lieutenant governor in Texas, Dan Patrick, who was a joke of a sportscaster in a radio talk show. And right now, lieutenant governor, the most powerful official in Texas.
Only in America. Blake Farenthold shows up, and this is why these people, of course, showed up, because these districts are rigged. At some point, people in Texas, this is really, to me, the tip of the sword in terms of the changing demographics in the country. It's also, too, going to affect a lot of the black districts, by the way, which are already very Latino. Sheila Jackson Lee's district, Al Green's district, there's going to be a domino effect on a lot of
Well, first of all, Congressman Al Green's district was also, that was when the whole time delay deal happened in Texas, when they redid the districts in a non-census year and said, fine, we'll create a black district in Dallas, 1 in Houston, but they basically wiped out the white Democrats in Texas.
Yeah, what's interesting also about this is the ramifications of the Democrats losing 1,000 seats on the Barack Obama administration, which means it's really important why you have to start at the ground up when you start to reform the DNC. But secondly, and most importantly, what happens now? You've got new elections. All of these districts and these elected officials have to be retried, if you will, or rerun, if you will, and it throws the whole political process and legislative process into question. And so what the Republicans have done based on race and politics, they now have to go redo the right way based on the federal court decision.
Andrew, look, Texas obviously is going to appeal this decision. They don't want to see this thing stand because they know the impact, and they're hoping a conservative Supreme Court will agree with it if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court.
Well, I'm very concerned about this gerrymandering and the outcome of the ruling of this federal bench striking down these districts, particularly when it comes to Will Hurd. But, gerrymandering is something that we see on both sides of the aisle. I live in Maryland. Went from being a 4-4 to a 6-2.
What Democrats
have been doing?
Politically, been struck down by federal district court. Tell me what Democratic district. Give me one Democratic district.
Maryland's third congressional district literally has been described as a pterodactyl being laid into the state. Not by me, but by federal
If you want to look at irregular districts, go look at District 15, 18, 28, 34, and 2 in Texas. Okay? And tell me that can compare to your Maryland examples, all right? The district in question, Lloyd Doggett's district, you guys had that graphic up of Lloyd Doggett's district? That is one of the most ridiculous districts in the entire United States. And that is done by Republicans. Because Republicans, for some reason, instead of changing a few policies,
I'm not defending gerrymandering. What I'm saying is that it affects both sides of the aisle. When Democrats have power, when Democrats have power, you guys, when Democrats have power, they draw districts that favor Democrats. Republicans
but there's a distinct difference between drawing districts to favor a party when you have clear racial gerrymandering, and we have seen that happen in more cases than not when it comes to Republican. when it comes to Republican legislatures. That's a simple fact.
Hispanic votes, an increase in Hispanic vote does not mean that those are going to be an increase in Democrat votes.
Precisely.
And hold on.
So if that's the case, why did Texas screw Latinos in other districts?
In 2010 and 2014, in 2014, the Texas Republicans won majority of Hispanic votes. Why did they screw them drawing the district?
Right.
I'm not defending Jerry.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay, all right.
Just read the Bill of Rights decision.
But what you have here is,
Okay.
but Texas is a minority majority state
Whatever.
that has gone
Read the
consistently
decision.
right.
Bottom line is clear racial gerrymandering. All right, folks, our next story on March 5th. Civil rights activists gathered in Selma, Alabama to commemorate the 52nd anniversary of the March for Voting Rights for African Americans, but it was this statement by Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill at a nearby church service that grabbed the headlines.
Every eligible U.S. citizen that's a resident of Alabama is registered to vote and has a photo ID so they can participate. We gave all 67 counties throughout the state of Alabama.
Merrill's statement on Alabama's voter ID hit a nerve with voting rights advocates who argue Alabama is one of many states engaging in voter suppression. Right now, we want to go to Skype from Alabama, and that is Secretary of State John Merrill. Secretary Merrill, welcome to TV1.
Good morning, Mr. Martin. It's great to be with you.
First and foremost, when it comes to this issue of voter fraud, what is the evidence of voter fraud in Alabama that caused you to say voter ID was important?
Well, Mr. Martin, one of the things that occurred when I was in the legislature was the introduction of a voter ID bill. And
when was that?
Excuse me?
When was that?
That was in 2011.
Okay.
I was a member of the legislature from 2010 to 2014. One of the things that I did when I was evaluating the merits of the bill was to determine whether or not there was actual evidence of voter ID or voter fraud. And there had been some incidences, but one of the things that was interesting to me is there had been no prosecution over the last decade or so. Now, since I...
Okay, now first of all, that's a lie. Okay, there have been 12 instances from 1998 through 2013, 12 instances of voter fraud where convictions were actually obtained. So he's wrong there.
I've been the Secretary of State. One of the things that we've done, we implemented a program where any citizen could indicate their interest in making sure that alleged violations that had occurred or any infraction that had been introduced was reported to us. So we entered into agreement with the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, Alabama Attorney General's Office, and we established StopVoterFraudNow.com. So we have a way of receiving those reports, then we can make sure that they're properly processed and that they're evaluated. We've had 318 incidences that have been reported.
Yes, 318 folks, 318 in different areas where people say there was voter fraud. How many prosecutions?
Yes, sir. So far, we have had 2 prosecutions that have occurred, and we've had 4 convictions since I've been the Secretary of State.
So you're telling me that when people say that hundreds of thousands of people are impacted by voter ID, so for instance, in Texas, that voter ID bill, 600,000 people, largely minorities, impacted by voter ID. When Texas filed their statement before the federal bench, they gave 12 examples in a decade. More than 25 million votes cast. They found 12. So
let me share this with you. I know Texas is real important. It's a real important state to the union, but it's not important to me today.
Well, no. Actually, the reason that's important because you talked about voter fraud even in other states. You talked about voter fraud in New Hampshire when, in fact, the Republican governor, the Republican Secretary of State, they've said we've found no evidence of fraud. So you've actually talked about voter fraud in other states, not just Alabama.
Yes, sir. And one of the things that was introduced to me, and there's plenty of empirical data about the situation in New Hampshire, and I would refer you to the Heritage Foundation, who would be able to make all of that information available to you for your review.
Okay. He just dropped the Heritage Foundation. At the very end of this video, I'm going to give you the information that's on the Heritage Foundation website. It took me about an hour and change to compile some rudimentary information that I think should interest you based on what this guy just said. But let's continue.
But the thing that we're concerned about is making sure that in Alabama it's real easy to vote and real hard to cheat. And the thing that I was attempting to do at Brown Chapel Church was to ensure that all the people that were in attendance knew that anybody in Alabama that wants to have a photo ID that does not have one, we'll be happy to provide one to them at absolutely no cost.
But here's a piece, though. Again, what this goes to is, you see the bill was introduced in 2011. All of these voter ID bills, all of a sudden, came up after the election of President Barack Obama. At a National Association of Secretaries of State convention, this is what David Becker, Executive Director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research, said, because they actually study this. There's a system of checks and balances in place. We all know in this room that if there were massive voter registration fraud, we would have seen large numbers of flagged records that didn't match DMV records or Social Security records, that we would have seen unusual levels of activity we hadn't seen before, that we would have seen large numbers of requests for out-of-state mail ballots that we hadn't seen before. You have experts who say your claim to this massive voter fraud is virtually non-existent.
But now, I have not made any claims about massive voter fraud. I've talked about specific instances that have been introduced to me either in our state or through empirical data. But I know one of the things that's been shared is about Alabama being a state that deals with voter suppression. And the thing I want you to know about what we've done in Alabama is that we registered more voters than at any time in the history of the state. Since January the 19th, 2015 until today, we registered more than 600,000 new voters in our state, which has led us to 3,340,000 new total voters in the state, and that's the largest number in the history of Alabama. And we broke every record for participation in our primary with 1.25 million on March the 1st, 2016, and then again on the general election day, November the 8th, with more than 2.1 million voters participating, which are the largest numbers in the history of the state. So we don't see any evidence of voter suppression in Alabama. As a matter of fact, when we have had situations introduced to us where we've had constituents that are homebound and can't get out of their homes, and they can't go to the regular location that's open every day in their local county, or they can't go to where our mobile units go, we've actually been to their homes and given them photo IDs in their homes. And we want to do that because we feel like we're committed to ensuring that they can participate at the level they want.
Well, Secretary Merrill, you talked about how you have not talked about massive voter fraud, but that was the reason for the law. Republican lawmakers in Alabama said we're passing this law because of massive voter fraud to protect. So I'm trying to understand, if there was no evidence of massive voter fraud, and that wasn't your argument, then why have a law?
The reason for my vote was not the reason for the majority of my colleagues' vote either. It was to preserve and protect the integrity and the credibility of the elections process, and that added another level of validation for people that wanted to participate. And that's one of the reasons why it was so important to me to make sure that people that did not have IDs, because they didn't have driver's license or because they could not afford a non-driver ID, that we put a provision in the law that would allow us to give them an identification piece that they would not have to pay for. Now, the effort that we've made so far, Mr. Martin, in order to ensure that all citizens have an ID by actually going to all 67 counties every year since I've been the secretary, and to go to people's homes, proves our commitment to ensuring that we're doing everything we can to allow them to participate at the level they want to participate.
All right. Now, there may be two ways to look at this, okay? And I'm just trying to be straight out as much as I can. Number one, based on what he just said, the state legislature was looking to create a solution for a problem that they acknowledge does not exist if they did not create those laws in order to solve massive voter fraud. Okay, that's on one side. Now, the other way of looking at it is, if this gentleman, again, is telling the truth with the numbers that he cited as far as the increase in vote count during the primaries and the increase in vote count during the national election, you basically have to take your hat off to him. Now, further, if they are willing and have an active program to provide people with with IDs that are sufficient to vote, and they are in fact going out to these areas where they have pretty much shut down the actively getting people IDs that they can use to vote. Again, if that's in fact the case, I can't say anything against that. But if that's not in fact the case, and again, with the laws being created to solve a non-existent problem, in my mind, that is problematic.
Just to vote, or maybe it's to run for office.
Gotcha.
To help.
Well, unfortunately, I'm out of time right now. We're going to continue the conversation again because, of course, there's a lawsuit against Alabama, and you're defending that will come up in September of this year. We'll be certainly covering that lawsuit right here on TV1. Thanks so much.
All right. Now, as I was stating, he made reference to the Heritage Foundation with their empirical evidence regarding voter fraud. Now, this is going to take a minute, but it's going to be a lot faster me giving you this information this way than you going on the site yourself and reading it. But I encourage everyone to go on to that site and take a look at the data that the Heritage Foundation has compiled regarding voter fraud. Okay? Now, I'm going to do this alphabetically by state just to give you an idea, but certain states I'm going to say you need to really take a good look at because they are really tough on voter fraud. First of all, let's start with his state of Alabama. Between 1998 and 2013, there were 12 actual convictions for voter fraud, 9 of which were for the fraudulent use of absentee ballots. Okay? Arizona is one state that you do not want to screw around with as far as doing anything illegal or wrong as far as voter fraud is concerned. From 2008 to 2016, there were 19 cases or convictions for voter fraud. Okay, now the convictions could be one person or multiple persons. Anytime it was a big number, I'm going to let you know. But out of that 19 cases, 15 of them were for duplicate voting. And when they hit these people for that, they fine them some big money. I'm talking about $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Arizona, if they catch you, you are going to pay, and you are going to pay a lot of money. Excuse me. Arkansas, there were 3 cases of voter fraud conviction from 2002 to 2016, 2 of which were, again, for fraudulent use of absentee ballots. California, you would think that that would be a biggie. No, California actually didn't make the top 3. In California, there were 20 cases of voter fraud convictions, 13 of which were for false registrations. California was one of the states where in one instance it was so bad that an election had to be overturned and a new election called for because the voter fraud was so rampant. Okay. Now, again, this is not, when you think about voter fraud, don't just think about federal elections or governor elections, Senate elections, House of Representative elections. A lot of the voter fraud is at the local level. Okay. It's for things like school boards, sheriff's departments, various commissioners, city council members. Okay, I'm not going to break it down to that level. That's up to you if you really are that interested, and honestly you should be, to go at least look in your own state to see what's going on there. But in California, the election I was talking about was an election for the mayor of a small city just outside the city of Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken. Colorado, there were 5 convictions, 2 of which were for duplicate voting. One election in Colorado actually was overturned and a new winner was declared. Connecticut, again, 5 cases of voter fraud convictions. 3 of them were for fraudulent use of absentee ballots from 1996 to 2009. Florida, again, you would think that would be a pretty big state. Didn't make the top 10. 14 cases of voter fraud convictions, 5 of them, which is the majority, or the largest number, were for ineligible voters. That took place from 1996 to 2012. Georgia, you do not want to get caught doing something again wrong in Georgia. 9 cases of voter fraud, 5 of which were for fraudulent use of absentee ballots and also for buying votes. 1997 to 2015. Hawaii only had 2 false registrations, 1982 to 2014. Idaho, again, 2 cases, duplicate voting and ballot petition fraud, 2004 to 2009. Illinois, another state that if you are a resident, not a U.S. citizen, but a resident, and they catch you dirty voting, Illinois deports people for voter fraud, okay? There were 11 cases of voter fraud, and I'm sorry I didn't get the actual, the reason I didn't get the actual number for the largest amount of voter fraud is because voter fraud was all over the place. There was really no major significant number in any one category. I will tell you that in one case of voter fraud, 63 individuals were arrested and convicted for voter fraud, which occurred, I believe, back in 1982. And that is the largest case of voter fraud in the history of the Department of Justice, the single largest case. Okay, in Indiana, 34. Now, that seems to be a huge number, but that 34, 25 of which occurred, again, 1982, and it was one specific race where 25 convictions were obtained in an East St. Louis mayoral race. And there was fraud rampant all over the place. It was so bad that they had to call for a brand new election, and they actually had significant monitors standing by at each polling place, and they were challenging in the second election, they were challenging the crap out of everybody on that one. In Iowa, again, small state, larger number than Illinois. You had 14 convictions, 12 of which were people that were ineligible to vote. That took place between 2008 2015. When I say ineligible to vote, what that means is it's either a convicted felon who in that particular state doesn't have the right to vote, or any a person who is not an actual U.S. citizen, or a person who is not actually a resident of the city, county, or state that they voted in. That's what ineligible means. Kansas, again, another state that you want to really watch out for. They have a bunch of duplicate voting there. 5 cases in Kansas from 2004 to 2014, and all 5 were for duplicate voting. And they really threw the book at the the people that were involved in the 5 cases. Kentucky, 19 cases, 19 convictions of individuals, 18 of which were for buying votes from 2002 to 2014. And I make a special reference The one case that wasn't included in the buying votes, that occurred in 1948. So that just tells you how far back the Heritage Foundation basically is going, trying to document voter fraud. Louisiana, 4 cases, 3 of which were for buying votes. Maine, 1, I'm not going into that. Maryland, 2, I'm not going into that. Massachusetts, 2. I will say that when they bust you on voter fraud in Massachusetts, again, this is another state where they really throw the book at you. Michigan, 6 cases where convictions were obtained, 3 of which were ballot petition fraud. That occurred 2005 to 2014. Now, here is the mother lode. Minnesota, from 2008 to 2011, 114 convictions on voter fraud, 96 of which were for ineligible voting. So over a 3-year period, apparently they had a problem and they hauled everybody's butt off to court to the point that you do not want to mess around in Minnesota. And I guess the people got the message in Minnesota because after 2011, the Heritage Foundation hasn't documented anything since. Mississippi, 18 convictions on voter fraud, 8 of which were, again, for buying votes from 2002 to 2013. Missouri, 9 cases of convictions for voter fraud, 8 of which were for false registrations. In the state of Missouri, because of the false registrations and voting, an election was overturned. Nevada, 4 cases, false registration. New Hampshire, which he mentioned, there are only 3 cases in New Hampshire of fraudulent use of absentee ballots. So where he was getting that huge number of voter fraud in New Hampshire, his site that he's referring everybody to doesn't support his statement. New Jersey, again, New Jersey's kind of messy, but only 10 cases, 9 of which were for fraudulent use of absentee ballots. New Mexico, 5 cases, I believe all 5 were false registrations. New York, 7 cases. Now, one of the documented cases was where the New York Department of Investigations also did an integrity test in 2014. And New York City failed that test miserably. Their agents went in and attempted to vote illegally 63 times. They were successful 61 times. So you would think that New York, especially New York City, should have had a hell of a lot more arrests and convictions for voter fraud. For whatever reason, and again, I don't know, but the Heritage Foundation only documented 7. North Carolina, which everybody talks about, they had 10. They had elections, 3 of their elections were overturned because of a voter fraud. Also, they had a heck of a lot of convictions for buying votes. Ohio had 15 convictions on voter fraud, 5 of which were for false registration. Oregon had 6 convictions, Pennsylvania 7, South Carolina 1, South Dakota 2, Tennessee 6. Now we get to Texas. Texas had 15 convictions for voter fraud, 5 of which were for fraudulent use of absentee ballots. Utah had 1, Virginia had 8, and they were all over the place. Washington had 10, and it was basically a tie between fraudulent use of absentee ballots and false registrations from 2004 to 2008. West Virginia had 6, 5 of which were for buying votes. Wisconsin had 22, and that was like a total mess. And they were all over the place as well. And Wyoming had 3. So those are the numbers that the Heritage Foundation is putting out there as far as this massive voter fraud. Now, remember, there are approximately 700 some odd cases of convictions for voter fraud across the country. But that's over let's just say it's over a 10-year period. I'm going to shrink it. It's actually over 20. But over a 10-year period, you got 700 cases, and there were like more than 2 billion votes cast in this country over the past 10 years. So again, all these laws are solutions that are looking for a problem. The problem is not that massive. And now imagine all the money that these states, various states, are spending to put these laws into place and to, I guess, defend these laws when they're going to court and they're losing. This is, this is just ridiculous as far as what they're doing. Now, if they could actually give people IDs or set up IDs, no charge, no inconvenience, whichever way they want to set them up, I really don't have a problem with that. But if there are people out there that can't dial a number, advise the government agency that should be set up for this, that they do not have an ID, they want to have an ID, and have them either meet someplace that's central or easily able to be gotten to, we're going to have to do something here, because there are 200 million people in this country that should and do have the right to vote. And hell, if we're lucky if we get half of that, or 3/4, forget about 3/4. You're lucky if you get 60% of that. I believe in the last election, approximately 60% of the people voted in the general election. And that's a shame. I mean, another 100,000 plus voters, if they had voted in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, would have completely reversed this election if they had voted for Hillary Clinton. And 100,000 voters out of 200 million, that's not a number. So we need to get policies in place that are going to make it easier for our citizens to vote, not harder.